What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode. This time we're going to do another reaction video, and the video that we're going to watch today is entitled Doing 100 Years. And just as the title says, the guy that's going to be doing in the video, he's going to be doing 100 years. And now, who the hell can do 100 years? That's a life sentence, right? But, you know, the reason I picked this video is because the video is used for jail prevention for kids. And this guy drops a lot of jewels. He's been incarcerated a long time, and you know, he's faced some of the real struggles that come from being incarcerated. And I thought it'd be a great video to react to. So y'all know how we do it. We're gonna watch the video together. I'm gonna pause it. You got something to talk about? Hit the comments.
If you could just give us your name and tell us where you are and how long you've been here.
Kevin Henry, Wabash Valley. I've been here 6 years.
So we were just talking to your cellie, Mitch, and we were talking about the idea that this is a show that we're doing with kids who have been sentenced to long prison sentences at very young ages. What advice would you give them as someone now who's an adult about how they can mentally prepare for the years that are ahead for them behind bars?
I think the biggest thing they can do is find a purpose and realize that you can actually have a life in prison. It isn't going to be the life that you would choose for yourself, I would hope, but you can actually have a productive life in prison. And I think you really need to find that purpose and to find something that will give you a reason to continue going on a semi-positive path every day.
So tell me how.
You know, imagine having 100 years. You got 100 years and you got to find a purpose. A lot of people that's even in the free world, they struggle to find a purpose. Now imagine having to find your purpose while being incarcerated doing 100 years. You've got to live this life until it expires behind these walls with a life sentence. So you got to find some kind of purpose in your day. You know, like your life is basically thrown away to a degree if you got 100 years, a life sentence. But majority of the time, from what I've seen when I was incarcerated, people with 100 years, and a lot of time they're in the law library and they fighting their case, and that's what's giving them hope and purpose, is that they're gonna beat that case and get back out. But it's crazy because even not having 100 years, say for example, like me, I got 22 years. You gotta find purpose, knowing that it's still like a decade out before you get released. You gotta find some kind of purpose, and there, you know, my purpose was getting sharper for the future and being able to maximize the results of life when I got back out that next time around, even if it was a decade out. But yeah, you got to find some purpose, or you're just going to be a crash test, going to be throwaway. Like, you just don't have no value of life. And man, imagine trying to find that behind them walls. So
How many years you've been incarcerated as a whole?
Coming up on 30.
So you've served 30 years almost already.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about where you served the first part of your time.
24 years at Michigan City.
And you were just telling me sort of this surreal story that I hadn't thought about before. And that's the difference between being someplace like Michigan City and here at Wabash. Describe that for me.
Michigan City is more enclosed. You've got a wall. The old wall was 43 feet. I think the new one's about 10 or 15 feet lower. But it's more enclosed, and you kind of forget day to day seeing trees and cars and stuff like that, and you compare it to this place, which is very open. You know, you have no wall. You see outside, you see the trees, you see the animals. We've got rabbits that walk around with us. We've got a highway out there. You watch the cars. Some guys think it makes it harder for them. For me, it's a little taste of freedom.
Why would they think it makes it harder?
first and foremost, my man said he's got 30 years in. 30 years he's been incarcerated behind a wall. And he's explaining the difference between these penitentiaries. One, he says, got a big wall, and one doesn't, and they can see out into the open fields and, you know, highway and thing of that nature. Now, I'm 39 as I record this video, about to be 40 in January, and this man has been through 80s, 90s, 2000s. He's been incarcerated. He's probably never ever held a smartphone, probably never been on the internet. They might got some tablets or something up in there, but think about it. He's in a penitentiary for 20 plus years that got a concrete wall around it, 49 feet high. that he can't see over. He's just behind this concrete wall, but he's existing. His life got to go on. As you heard him, he said he needs purpose. So he's behind this wall, going to library, chow, watching TV, waiting on the next day. Just imagine, this is what life, and this is the result of one bad decision. And keep in mind, anybody can be in that man's position, especially the way the world's moving today, where everybody's about some gunplay. Because, you know, maybe you shoot somebody in the commission of them breaking in your house, but if you just free with that gun and you just pop up somebody on anger or something like that, yeah, your life is over with. 100 years. You're gonna walk down how many of those years before you get out on a hope note? Yeah, you're gonna walk down 20, 30 of them before you even get a shot at parole. That's a long time. That's a long time. But you know, the difference is he's talking about when you got a penitentiary that doesn't have a wall around it, is that, you know, you get to see life continuously going on. For me, it was always a peace of mind. I love getting to a facility where I could have a window or something and I could see, you know, like just like the stuff blowing in the wind, you know, in comparison to being on a concrete island. And I had been on one called Sterling that was just like that, wall around it. You know, it housed everything from high to medium to low. So no matter how your points went, either you went up or you went down, but everywhere you went, it was just around the concrete island. You know, you look out and all you would either see is the yard or you see another kill fence. You know, you wouldn't see nothing while you're moving through the facility. It's nothing but concrete. And they wonder why you turn cold. You know what I mean? Damn, you're just surrounded by this concrete, but let's get back to it.
Because sometimes the idea is that you can't necessarily miss what you don't see.
So it's just too hard to see cars coming and going when you know you can't be in that car.
For some, yeah.
So how do you mentally cope with being behind bars? Because for a lot of the kids who are just new to this, and some of these kids have never even been in juvenile detention, they literally have gone from being a teenager out on the streets and at home to looking at a 30-year sentence in an adult prison. How do you mentally get through that? What would you tell them? Is it a mind game?
Very much so. You have to understand that first of all, there is hope. No matter how old you are, there is hope. And you have to keep that in mind. This can't be your entire life. You have to try to maintain some kind of contact outside, some kind of hopes, dreams, and like I said, find a purpose. It's very much a mind game.
The question that was asked to him was, as a young man coming in to do a 30-year bid in a men's penitentiary, coming from a child that been on the streets, living with their parents or coming on their way, to wrapping their mind around being inside of a penitentiary with 30 years, man, that is a mind game like no other, because life just changed as you know it. Ultimately, everything is just switched. You got no say-so to how your day, your week, your month, or anything goes. If you do, it's only to the slightest degree. And, you know, of course he says keep hope, because imagine doing time without no hope. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to kill something on a regular basis. You're going to be angry, frustrated. You know your life is over with, and that the reality that you wake up every day to is a concrete wall, a metal bunk, and this slop that comes through the chow hall window. You know what I mean? Like, praise God. I'll be thankful all the time, because when I caught my case here, I intended to shoot that person. And I'm thankful that God didn't let me kill that person, because if I'd have killed him, I'd have killed myself, and I probably would have killed a lot of pieces of my family in that commission of all that stuff right there. And I was never thinking like that, but here I am, you know, after all is said and done, you know, paid a hefty price on that mistake to learn these lessons. And that's why I thought this video was good for us to tap into, because, man, this old school cat giving some real game right here. I mean, damn, he's been locked up 30 years. And I mean, this is the best advice he can give to a person that was in his shoes previously. But let's hear the rest of it.
Do people on the outside tend to forget about you once you're inside? Tell me about that.
A lot of times, especially the people you call your friends. You find out when you get locked up who your friends really are, because it doesn't take long for them to realize that, okay, they're outside, their life goes on. It's not their fault that yours hasn't. And they got to go about their daily lives and go about their business. You know, I've been a little bit fortunate in that my family's still hanging around. I lost both my parents, but you know, I've got a 33-year-old daughter, and I've got grandkids. I've got a fantastic wife. But yeah, a lot of people, and especially friends tend to.
Especially when you're a teenager. Could you imagine those people that you call friends now? You get a 30-year bid, you think them is still going to be your friends? You might got one or two of them that might be, you know, the small pieces of the equation, but ultimately, no matter how much, you got a 1-year bid, 2-year bid, 3-year bid, you go to jail, out of sight, out of mind, majority of your friends, your people are going to fall off, your girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it may be. Ultimately, when you get incarcerated, you become a liability to somebody. Now you want them to answer your phone calls. Now you want them to send canteen. A lot of people don't want to do that. So ultimately, by becoming a liability and just life moving, because being incarcerated, life stands still. You got to think about that again. You know, life stands still. Life for somebody on the outside world got all kinds of things going on every day. You know, the news, the world, life, you know, people in it. You know, man, life is moving fast on the other side of these walls out here. And there, that's the slowest time ever, especially being in the county. The county be feeling like, you know, a week feel like a month, and a month feel like a year. You know, at least while you're incarcerated in a penitentiary, you know, time kind of moves quick because they give you more vocational options. You got gym to go to. You know, you got a little more of the luxuries of your day. But man, that's it's existing. It's a imagine life as you know it just being behind this concrete wall. And that's a reminder to everybody, because we just want to slip up away from being in this man's place.
Go away.
Especially, I would imagine, when you're a teenager and something like this happens to you when you're a teenager, and suddenly your name and your picture is plastered all over the paper. Would imagine there aren't too many parents out there who would want their teenagers staying associated with a young kid who's now locked up in an adult prison.
Probably not, and I know it was hard on my ex-wife. It was hard at times on my daughter growing up, you know, because her father was associated with, you know, being the one in prison and all that. There were times she actually got into physical fights about it. On one hand, I was kind of proud of her because she stood up for Dad, but on the other hand, it was really sad that she had to do that.
How old were you when you first came in?
22.
We're following a boy who was here at the Wabash Youth Unit, who was then transferred to Plainfield. And he has a young son. He's now 18. He was locked up when he was 17. He does not have a long prison sentence. He has about 4 more years to serve. But what would you tell him about being a young dad in prison when he has a little one at home, and what that means for family life?
He better realize what's important, and realize that that little boy is going to look up to his father, and he's going to want to do everything his dad did. We even saw it with my daughter. She wanted to do everything Dad did, and that unfortunately included some of the bad stuff too. And so she went through her periods too. And he needs to realize that a little boy is going to look up to his dad and want to follow in his footsteps. And he needs to get it right now before he's like the guy that we just interviewed for the Plus program a couple weeks ago, that he's on one side of the institution, his son's over here, and he's got another son in another institution. And that's no way.
How does that happen?
So he just said that, you know, that's the best advice he'd give a young man with a kid, you know, because ultimately a child follows in his father's footsteps. Now, I didn't see a lot of that myself, but I've seen instances of it. There was times that I've seen, you know, people in there with their dad, their uncle, their brother, you know what I mean? But without no role models, no guidance, and no real direction, you know, this stuff continuously goes on, you know, generation after generation. And it's crazy to me, being in almost 2023, that we can't recognize and see through the smoke screen after so many previous generations that failed, and we still falling into the same errors of people in the 80s and the 90s. Man, it's 2023, like, and it's crazy because especially where I come from in Denver, you know what I mean? Like that culture, gang culture, man, it's still breeding. Like, it's like someone smoking crack in 2023. Like, who still smokes crack, right? Somebody that wants to get high, but like, who still gangbangs in 2023? Like, why though? I mean, like, this shit, we ain't learned from this shit yet already. We ain't figured this shit out yet. We all want to live better quality lives, and I don't got no kids in that sense like that where I could, being incarcerated, I can't feel like that. But man, I can only imagine having to raise your kids from a hour-long 10-15 minute phone call that you got to pay for, visits that your kid got to come in and get patted down, and hands raised and go through that whole little process, sit in a chair and parent through letters. Like, damn, you'd think your kids would be fucked up having to go through all that. But I guess it's better to know they true family and they true blood through some kind of way, right? But let's hear the rest.
But it has to stop. Someone's got to stop it.
What would you say about juvenile crime?
I don't know. We've seen it grow so much worse from when I was a kid, and the violence factor has escalated so much. And I think a lot of it is our fault, and by our, I'm talking about those of us that are wearing this and in prison because we weren't there for those kids.
That's some real shit. Especially generations like mine and ones that came for it. Like, everybody's locked up, everybody's incarcerated. Then you go into the penitentiary and you're gonna get raised by an old motherfucker like this as a young kid. Old motherfucker like this is probably gonna guide a young motherfucker that's doing some time. He gonna teach him out of jail, and he gonna kind of look out for him. And this is who you get raised by while you're incarcerated. And ultimately, life as you know it gets reduced to pebbles from one bad decision.
To help raise them, and this is what they've had to model themselves after.
Do you think that some of them almost glamorize prison life? They think they know what it's like.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I think a lot of kids think that this is where you get your credibility. They think this is
some real shit. Usually, you feel like, and I know a lot of kids do, that going to jail, prison, it increases their rep and their notoriety, and it's like a rite of passage, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a shame that we feel that way, because the narrative of everybody getting out of prison is always the same shit. You get out, you're a little swollen, a little buffer, you know what I mean? Body look right, but what that mind like? You feel me? Like, a lot of these cats getting out, going through prison, they got their chest out and they feeling like they the man after they done did that time, and they get smoked. They get killed real fast and quick, because that body, that's vanity. That shit is good to stay healthy and shit like that. But if that's all your 100% of your time went to was just working out and not working out the mind, shit, you behind times, and you gonna feel the wrath of the world as soon as it hits you. And your only destination is either the grave or back to prison, and that's the cold game, because life is so valuable. You know what I mean? But he's speaking some real shit.
Is what makes you cool and all that. This is not cool. There's nothing about living in a bathroom in a closet with another man that's cool. And that's what this amounts to. This amounts to the size of a lot of people's closets. There's nothing cool about it.
That's some real shit too, though, just on the pretense that nothing is cool about going to prison and sharing a cell with another man day in, day out. And this cell is the cell that you not only live in, but this is your bathroom. You know what I mean? This is where you cook your food at. This is your kitchen. This is your study. And you sitting up in here at night just farting on one another. Everybody in the cell farting from this laboratory food they've been feeding you. Ain't nothing cool about that.
When I got to prison, I'd seen a little bit of violence on the streets and everything, but I hadn't been in Michigan City for 3 weeks when I passed a guy in education coming downstairs, literally holding his intestines in his arms. And that incident, it upset me. I mean, I threw up and all that. Within maybe 4 months, I was sitting in the chow hall eating supper, and a guy was 10 feet to my left getting stabbed. And to me, all it meant was I needed to hurry up because we were getting locked down.
Now, that's some real shit too, because he just said he was walking to medical and then seen the dude coming down holding his intestines. That's because he got gutted. And in the penitentiary, the knives in there are called bone crushers. And what he's talking about is somebody gutted him. If they didn't gut him with a bone crusher, they didn't gutted him with some razors or some kind of metal or something. And I believe that his intestines was hanging out of his stomach. And then he said he's in the chow hall. That brings back memories for me, being in the chow hall and some shit cracking off, and you ain't even tripping on it. You just know that they about to come pepper spray and they about to do all that stuff. You better get all your food you can, because you about to get locked down. You ain't about to get no food, and depending on how severe it is, you know what I mean? You don't know when you're gonna come off a lockdown. I done been in the chow hall many times when fights break out with COs and inmates on inmate, people being stuck the all nine, and you just sitting there eating food. But you gotta remember, the chow hall is where all the units and cell blocks sometimes cross paths. So, if some shit kicks off, usually that's where it's gonna kick off, is either in the chow hall or in the the hallway coming to and from. But you gotta eat your food and keep it pushing and act like you didn't see nothing. You know what I mean? Like, this is something that is tension in the air at all times. So, shit like this can pop off at any given time, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, because you got so many men in one environment, and there's no way that all men around here are going to be, on the same page and humble. And sometimes they are for a good portion, but shit, anything is possible in prison.
When you can make that kind of a transformation in the space of 3 or 4 months, there's nothing cool about that.
Do you think they just have no idea what the true reality of it is? Because it seems to me they hear stories on the street, but for some reason they still just don't get it. They just don't make that connection.
And they need to, because people aren't playing anymore. They're not playing with crime, and you don't get that many chances anymore. And so they need to take it seriously. They need to understand that this is not going to be their life. They can't let this be their life.
What advice would you have for the kids who are currently in the youth unit, who are eventually, many of them will transfer over to the adult side? What would you want them to know before they make that transition?
That this is for real. Sometimes people talk about how the other prisons are a little harder and more dangerous and all that than Wabash is, and maybe to some extent that's true, but violence and life-ending violence can happen anywhere, and it can and does happen. And figure out what you're doing. And
life-ending violence, like he said, can happen at any time. You in prison, you doing time with the worst of the worst. Everybody that you around, you gotta think about, is in there for breaking a crime, a severe crime more than likely, you know what I mean, if they're in prison and they're doing time. You housed by thousands around individuals with 100 years, 200 years. And life-ending violence, ain't nobody trying to play fight or slap box. A lot of times, they fighting to kill. And this is a real reality. And I think this is a great video, especially for the younger demographic to hear this, because y'all will slip away. Y'all one slip away from having this as your reality for your entire life.
understand what you're doing. Understand what you're doing to yourself and to the people that love you.
Mitch talked about that they're not just hurting themselves, they're hurting their families.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe at their age they don't understand that. You guys have, had the wisdom now that with age to understand the repercussions.
My mother passed away in 2005. I got locked up in December of '81. So for all those years, the only time she saw her son was in prison. And after either 2 or 3 or 4 hours, somebody was telling her that she had to go out one door and her son had to go out another door. That ought to tell you what you're doing to your parents. Or
Y'all ain't gonna learn until it's too late. The man said that his mom passed away in 2005 while he was incarcerated. That was my worst fear while I was incarcerated, that my mother would pass and I'd be behind this concrete wall. This man then went through that and experienced that, and the whole time, I think, from the time he got locked up to the time she passed away, he has been incarcerated behind this decision. And we don't know what it was, murder or whatever it was, but the decision that he made cost him and his parent, mom, dad, whole family, all that right there. She went to her grave never seeing her son out the penitentiary. She died miles and miles and miles away from where he's doing time at, and he's helpless. He can't do nothing. I doubt he even got to go see her burial. You know what I mean? This is something he had to deal with himself internally behind those walls amongst all these other men, all the turmoil, all the feelings of hate that live behind them walls. Yeah, that's a tough road. I feel for him right there.
Your brother and sister that are counting on you, or were counting on you to help protect them and show them the way to grow up, but you're in prison, so you can't. You know, there's a lot of pain involved. Pain that a lot of times doesn't get spoken about. My mother never talked about how bad it hurt her, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out either.
So I think that's an important point for these kids to understand that while you might be young now, if you just got sentenced to 30 years, which many of our kids have, you're 15 now, your parents are going to go through a lot, and you eventually might not even be alive by the time they get out. A lot can happen.
My parents died within 13 months of each other. And in that time frame, I also lost a couple of close friends. And I mean, that's really hard to deal with when you're locked up and you lose that many people back to back. But my parents never thought that they would never see me free again. They always thought they'd see me outside. And I mean, that's hard.
How many more years do you have?
Yeah, I bet that pain runs deep. You know, he said his mom never even spoke on it, but I can guarantee, you know, those holidays, when all the family gets together and everybody, but you ain't there. You know, you asking for a care package. You want $100 to get some Christmas sausage and cheese or something. You know what I mean? And you think about your family. All these years that went by, and it's a cold game because he said he didn't not only lose his mom, but he lost his father back to back within a short time span. Man, and had to deal with it behind the walls, and it's still behind the walls, and never got to see neither of them. Never got to, never will, ever will. All the life as he knows it has changed. His family members, his mom, dad, gone. Damn.
If the state has their way, 15. We're negotiating. Well, actually, I'm negotiating. They're not. We're working on it.
What would you say is the hardest thing about being locked up? If you could tell these kids the hardest thing about being locked up, what would it be?
Looking back now, realizing how much I could have done, education became important to me after I came to prison, and I fell in love with education, and I realized now what I could have done with it had I done it at the time that I was supposed to, and realizing what you could have done with your life, and that now it's a little late. Say I do another 5 years and I'm 57 years old when I get out. How many employers are knocking down the door to hire a 57-year-old person, no matter what your experience is, let alone add up the fact that you've done 35 years in prison?
Strong point right there. Getting out of prison at 57 years old with regrets like that of what he could have done with his academics, with his life as he knows it, but he chose another route, and ultimately, in a sense, he found out when it was too late of what he could have been, what he could have done. And you getting out 57, you in 2023 where everything's technology, life is moving faster than humankind has ever known, and you just came out of doing 35 years. And believe me, this is people getting out all the time doing biz like that. And they get out here and, you know, they work in construction, they doing electricity, they doing all that type of stuff. But believe me, you know, there's not a lot of employers that really do want to hire somebody like that. That's a risk right there. You know, 35 years in prison, you must be motherfucking crazy. You know what I mean? That's the first thing you would think, right? But man, he's speaking some real shit.
It's a hard realization.
I think it's interesting you bring up that you fell in love with education here. I've been following kids now for 13 years who are in the juvenile justice system. And for the life of me, I can't get them to understand, stay in school. Trust me, you might hate it, but trust me, you'll eventually get it. just hang in there, and they just can't do it. And I understand for some of them why it's hard. A lot of them are taking care of little brothers or sisters, or they're working full time and they're working a night shift, and they're taking on a lot of added responsibility. But what would you say to them about, trust me, I've been there, stay in school?
Man, one of the saddest things that's happened recently is the cutting of funding for college. I understand they're going to vocational classes for job training and all that, but to me, college is not about job training. College is about critical thinking skills and learning to think on your own, solve problems, and that just got taken away. But you can supplement it yourself. Get, whatever training, whatever schooling they're trying to give you, take it. It's going to help you in the long run. It truly is. It's not about just job skills. It's about learning to think for yourself. It's about learning to make decisions and understand what you're doing and what the consequences are. And once you understand that every decision you make has consequences.
Every decision in your life, you got consequences. Think about that. Every decision you make in life, you got a consequence, whether it's good or whether it's bad. That's some real shit. But as far as the vocation goes, yeah, even for people who ain't incarcerated, it ain't so much just about school, but it's about having the experience and the know-how, because that's what employers, and that's how you set your price tag, is they pay you for what you know. And luckily for me, while I was incarcerated, man, I took everything: culinary arts, power sewing. Then I got vocationals for days. And for me, it was part of just doing time and passing time, but ultimately I wanted the experience and know-how to give me more options when I did get out. Being in culinary arts, for example, I could have went on to be a chef. I could have went out there and could have did all kinds of stuff. But for me, I found through that, I didn't enjoy the process of prepping food and dealing with the back of the kitchen and being that wasn't for me, but it was good for the time being. And while you're out here, that's what you want to be able to do, is pick up as much knowledge and know-how as you can so you can find something that fits your groove. For me, it's e-commerce, online, social media marketing, you know what I mean? Things like that. Those are things that I find and have a passion for. But, you got to find your own lane. And when you find your own lane, man, you're going to win.
Your life becomes a little bit different.
Should the kids who are getting ready to transition from the youth units into the adult units, do you think that they should have a level of fear about making that move or that transition, or what should they know?
I don't know about fear, understanding and respect for what they're getting ready to do. It's going to be a difficult transition, and don't come out and try to play the tough role. All the tough guys are dead. Just find a place to fit in, and just do that. Don't fear it, but respect it and understand what you're getting ready to do.
Almost every single time we followed a kid who's transitioned, they start out with a lot of bravado. They're in the youth unit, they're like, I'm ready, I'm so ready to be out of here, I'm so ready for the adult unit. When in reality, the closer we get to whatever unit they're transitioning into, you can see the fear. You can tell, just because they've not known anything other than being in the youth unit. Do you remember what it was like 30 years ago when you were first coming in?
I was scared. Yeah. I very clearly and vividly remember those first few nights up in Michigan City in the A&O unit, and all the sounds, the doors slamming at night, the people yelling. Yeah, I can understand the fear, but there's really not that much to fear unless you create it.
So he just said there is no fear unless you create it, which is true, but ultimately there's a whole lot to be feared, because if you don't have the respect factor, and that's what prison's built on, is respect. If you come up here as a young kid and you just with your ways all over the place, somebody gonna make you respect it. So you definitely got something to fear, because you definitely gonna answer to somebody. You gonna respect something. There ain't you just gonna be a cowboy and you gonna buck the whole system. Nah, believe me, cats been in there doing long bids like this guy right here, 20, 30 years. They like they program, they like they piece, they like they unit a certain kind of way, and if you ain't gonna adhere to that and fall in place, you're gonna answer to that. You know what I mean? But you know, he did say something else before I hit pause that really stood out to me. He said all the tough guys is dead. You know what I mean? Believe me, the tough guys is dead, and that's crazy because on here, you know, usually you see everybody just being super tough in prison, but like you said, you gotta find your lane. You gotta figure out where you fit in and get in, because prison itself is a world of its own. I mean, like shit.
You know, there aren't that many problems that you're not going to create yourself.
What is that like laying in bed at night when you're just new to a prison like Michigan City or Wabash? What goes through your mind at night?
Wondering what you did to yourself and why, and is it going to end? What's next? That's always the big question. What's next?
It's really an epic mind game to be locked up.
Yes, it is. And it takes some work to maintain your mind. It especially if you're locked up for a long time. You know, a 30-year sentence is 15 years. I hate to admit this, but I did the first 15 years of my sentence, most of it high. Thankfully, I got out of that pattern, you know, and I think at that point I probably needed.
Excuse me. Got this little guy right here. Man, he just said he did his first 15 years of his 30-year bid high. And usually, with people with a lot of time, that's what they doing. They is getting high. They trying to escape. You know what I mean? They trying to get away from that reality of being in that concrete tomb, being the living dead. And man, ultimately, he kept it real though. For the first 15 years, he was just getting high and letting the time go by. The other 15 years, he's been on top of his program, right? He's been learning, educating, the whole nine. But let's hear him out some more.
I think at that point I probably needed it because I had a 100-year sentence. I would hate to think about trying to do my time high now because I'm enjoying my life. I don't enjoy where I'm at. Please don't even misunderstand that. I don't enjoy prison by any means, but I enjoy where I'm at with my life. I just received a letter the other night. Someone telling me that when I first started writing, my handwriting was real tight, and anyone that studied handwriting, they understood that I was ready to blow at any given time, and that my handwriting's completely changed. I found kind of not peace, but a place. And
I think that's what, I don't want to say what worries me about the kids, but we're seeing them so early on in the process. Some of them have been here less than a year. They're still trying to wrap their head around exactly what just happened. Did all this really just happen? And I think a lot of them are still at a point where they're thinking, well, I'm going to get out. Somebody's going to come save me. Do you go through that at the beginning too?
absolutely, especially for those of us that were in trouble quite a bit as kids, and we got rescued quite a bit. And you know, now I look back this far down the road and think, I wish they hadn't rescued me so many times. I wish they had let me sit. Yeah.
That's me. I used to be able to bail out, you know, get probation, ankle monitor, all that stuff, and ultimately, I guess in my subconscious mind, I kept feeling like, you know, every time I got caught up in trouble or something like that, I'd be able to get out until I caught that one case, that one time that was so extreme to a degree that there was no getting out. There was no bond, at least not a bond that I could make or anybody that I knew could make. And ultimately, I had to go set it down. And I think he's on point with that, because that's what happens when somebody's used to just getting out of jail, getting out of prison, you know, constantly being able to, you know what I mean, shake it. Because you land in one of these environments, man, there ain't no getting out.
Do you think too that a lot of kids just don't understand that they can actually end up in the adult system? Because a lot of times they'll say to us, I had no clue it could end up like this. I thought I was a juvenile and I would always stay in the juvenile system.
You know what? That could have been an excuse at one time, but in the last several years, I don't think any kid should think that, because look how young, they are these days coming in. Now they should never think that these days.
Do you think it's right for the system to sentence kids to the adult system, or should all kids be kept in juvenile?
I think it's good that I don't have to make that decision. I There has to be a place. I remember a time at Michigan City where kids coming in were just kind of thrown into population, and fortunately, most of the older guys at that time, they didn't pounce on them. They took them under wing and they kind of showed them. I was fortunate at 22 years old, even though I was one of the youngest people at Michigan City at that time, that some older guys took me under wing and showed me how to do time without getting killed or causing myself any undue problems. And I think we need that, but I don't know, throwing kids into an adult prison is just not a good idea.
From all the research and articles that I've read over the year, they say a lot of it has to do with brain research, that research shows that kids' brains just haven't developed to the point to where they should be treated or punished as adults, because their minds are still developing. They're very impulsive. They do things without thinking. They do things at age 15 that they wouldn't do at age 30. And you certainly seem at your age to have, I'm sure you're a lot different now than you were when you were 15 or 18.
I was one of those that did things, and you just did whatever was necessary at the time to get whatever it is you needed or wanted at the time, and you worry about the consequences later. The older you get, the more you start realizing that's just not a good plan at all. You need to understand what you're doing before you do it. And I can definitely see a difference between the way that I thought when I was even 22 and the way that I think now. Yeah.
It's scientifically proven that the male brain doesn't fully lock itself in and have the frontal cortex correctly until age 25. So you imagine at the age 15 making life decisions that are going to impact you in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and life as you know it. And that's a cold game, because if they sentencing you to 30 years as a 15-year-old kid for the decisions that you made, imagine what you're going to be like when you get out, because you're going to grow up in this institutional environment around nothing but men. You know what I mean? Like your growth is going to be hindered in all degrees. But who's to blame though? Because you made the decision at whatever age it was. That's some real shit.
Wish you could just impart all that wisdom on these kids before they get in trouble in the first place.
Yeah, but I remember older people sitting around talking to me and telling me that they made these mistakes and I was making the same mistakes and all that. And I thought I knew it all and that I was going to do it differently. And guess what? Not so much.
One of the things one kid told me that I hadn't thought about before was, he said, people are afraid of me now. I'm a prisoner and people are literally afraid of me now. Does that kind of follow you the longer you, somebody might even say to me, oh my gosh, weren't you afraid to be in that cell with him? He's serving a 100-year sentence. And I never look at it that way. But he recognized that there were friends who were afraid of him now.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, even once you get out, people are going to be looking at you differently. Those that knew where you were at, they're going to be looking at you differently. First of all, they're going to be waiting for you to screw up again. Secondly, they're going to be wondering, okay, now I know that he had to do things to defend himself in prison and all that. Is he going to resort to that out here? Yeah, it definitely follows you and it stays with you. I've been locked up this long and I still get it. In fact, someone that I work with, a volunteer that I work with, was told not too long ago by someone in the administration, now be careful because he is still a very dangerous person. You know what? No, I'm not. But that's okay. I understand that. I earned that the hard way, by being locked up for 30 years, by having this sentence.
Oh, he is. He don't even realize it. I think all of us that's been incarcerated don't really realize it, because there's so much shit that being incarcerated does to a person that you don't even realize it. You get institutionalized at 30 years. And he can't recognize it in himself because he feels like he's got so much control over this small environment that he lives in. But when you get out to this real world and this open world, it's a whole nother ball game. And you know, the stigma that comes with being incarcerated, yeah, you never gonna shake that. Me, I try to use it to my advantage, and hence the YouTube channel, hence the book, hence my whole purpose. You know what I mean? Because it's like ninjutsu. You know, I use that power that they try to use against me. You know, I use it on them because ultimately it was a blessing in disguise for me, and I've been trying to make the most out of it. Or like my mom would say, you know, make lemonade out of the lemons that life gives you. But yeah, that stigma that you get, especially having those felonies and being incarcerated and having to put these on your employment, your housing, all these things, yeah, man, you can't shake that because most of the time people get familiar with you in these type of degrees is on paper, and that's when you done had to check the box that you got a felony or you done did time. You know, I know statutes of limitations are like 7 years for some and this, that, and third, but man, you don't shake that. And when someone finds out you've been incarcerated, believe me, they look at you and always will look at you totally different than they had looked at you if they didn't know you hadn't been to prison. Because yeah, like you said, you know, prison be having some, you know, you got to do what you got to do. You got to, you know, you swimming in the gutter in there. You got to do what you got to do to survive in that thing. But let's hear him out some more.
I understand that. I earned that the hard way, you know, by being locked up for 30 years, by having this sentence. So, okay, I deserve that. I'll take it.
And you also, just like anybody on the outs, you mature.
Absolutely.
We all do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we hope we do.
Right. You know, some better than others, but.
So what would your final piece of advice?
You know, some people mature, yeah. My man's had 30 years to sit down and think about his decisions in his life. We would hope he would mature, right? You would think after doing these big type of bids, these long bids of just sitting down and having to reflect and having to be penalized every day of your life, you know, he's paying his dues right now. For whatever his decision was, he's paying his dues. Like I paid my dues 11 and a half years plus the parole. Yeah, I paid my dues to the system. You know, it should have me squared away, but ultimately the stain remains of having that felony and being convicted and being incarcerated, you know, and the stain ain't even just on paper or the felony, you know. Once again, it's the stuff that it does to the mind and you that you don't even recognize about yourself because you've been in this environment and you've been traumatized for so many years of being in that thing. Like it's another world of its own, and then you have to come out here into this world and abide by the rules and regulations and automatically be, you know, a normal civilian. But you can't be normal ever again because you just went through some abnormal shit for over a decade and some change. My man been in there 30 years. Imagine what he's like after 30 years. He's probably cool than a motherfucker as we see talking and shit, but believe me, he's probably institutionalized in his ways in a major way, and it's only natural, right? You know, I'm not trying to judge this man on that, but man, it's a cold game. And once again, we all just one slip up away from being in that man's shoes.
You are, if there are kids watching this who, you know, haven't served any time yet, but they're out there and they're, you know, getting into some trouble, who think something like this is never going to happen to them. And what would your advice be for the kids who now are 15 years old staring down a 30-year sentence, who still have a ways to go?
To those that haven't entered the system yet, don't. This is not a life. This is not what you should be thinking about. There's nothing out there that's worth doing this to yourself over. There's no amount of money out there worth this. I don't care how hard you have to work. I would trade anything to be able to go back and do this again and just make that one decision with knowing what I know now, you know, and stay out there. I remember one time my sister asked me, or my mom asked me why I couldn't be more like my sister and brother-in-law, and I'd lead a boring.
That man said he would trade anything just to go back and change one thing in his life, and that one decision in his life was the decision that routed him to prison for 100 years. Of the 30 that he's already done right there. Now, think about that right there. There's nothing in this life that's worth trading off to be in that man's position. But every day, especially for you young motherfuckers out there, you doing anything and everything against the rule books to land in that position. Y'all following these rappers and following this music and following the culture that's leading you to your ultimate destruction. You know, nothing's cool about that. That is no type of life, being behind the walls. You're giving up everything life is, you know it, to go live in another reality with a grown man that you don't even know in a 6x9 cell that has a sink and a toilet that he's gonna be using while you sleeping. You're gonna be rolling over in your bunk looking at this man taking his shit. You know what I mean? Smelling this man. Like, you traded all this in the free world right here to get here because you the tough guy. You that guy. You that guy. You the one, right? Y'all gotta pay heed to this, because nothing in life is worth trading off to have your life behind that concrete wall.
And why lead a boring life like they do? They work all day, they come home, they don't ever go anywhere. They every now and then on the weekends they get together with friends and play cards. Do you know how much I would love to do that these days? So yeah, don't come into the system. For those who are already here, get your head out of where it's at and figure out what it is you need to do to get your life back on track. Get your education, work on whatever you can work on to get yourself out of here and stay away from this. This is not the kind of life you need to be thinking about. You know, it's too late for some of us to go back, and you can't turn back the clock. You can't put the bullet back in the gun. It just doesn't work. I don't know what else I can tell them other than just don't.
That was excellent. Excellent. You know, it's funny, the minute you said you can't put the...
Man, that was a long, heavy pause right there. My man said that's the best thing he says, don't come in here. Don't come in here. Imagine what's going through his mind on that long, heavy pause right there. That man's thinking all that regret. He gonna go to the grave with regret. Mother done died, father done died. Whole time he been incarcerated, he couldn't be no kind of son to them, none of that. He traded off all that for that reality right there from one decision he made. Now, if that ain't a cold reality, fuck. That's all of our realities that's out there moving in an improper nature and not abiding by the rules and regulations that's set beforehand for us to move. And yeah, I get it. We're gonna break a few rules here and there, but once again, nothing in this life is worth trading off your freedom to live in that reality right there.
Bullet back in the gun. So many of the kids that we're following are here for murder. You know, that totally wasn't what they originally intended to do, or they were drunk or they were high, or it was that moment when their mind snapped. And I would think that I would constantly be thinking, let me take it back. I want to take it back for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that kind of sick feeling of, God, I wish I could just redo this for these kids. And you just can't.
And it doesn't matter what your crime is. I think you probably go through that. A lot of the guys that I've talked to, we all go through that, wishing that we could just one more chance.
Yeah.
And I've got a friend here in prison that was a juvenile that fired a gun through a house. Guess where the bullet landed? And he's now doing life without parole. All because he had gotten into it with that guy earlier in the day or the day before, wanted to just express his anger, so he shot through the house. Bullet happened to hit him in the head.
He's gonna do all his entire life. He traded off his life because he had anger towards that man, and in that moment of anger, he made that decision to shoot into that house and killed that man and killed himself at the same time. Because even though he's living, he's behind that concrete wall, existing for the rest of his life amongst other men that are in there because they fucked up and they made bad decisions. And some of those men that you in there with right there, they're cold hard killers though, you know what I mean? There ain't nothing good in their soul. But you're gonna be using the same showers. You're gonna be going sitting down at the same tables to eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all behind that one decision you made out of anger. Man,
Is it worth it? Yeah.
Anger really plays such a big role in so much of this too. You know, when you're just at that point where you're just so mad. Some of these kids are like, they feel like they almost blacked out when it happened. You know, can't even really remember doing it.
Yeah, how mad they're going to be when they're laying here in this rack in the middle of the night and they can't sleep, and the other one they've got to be mad at is themselves. You know, anger's never really been anger at anyone else has never really been a part of where I've been with this ever since the day I was arrested, because I was smart enough to understand that, I can be mad at the judge, but I put me in his courtroom. If I hadn't been in his courtroom, he wouldn't have been able to send me here. Can't be mad at the prosecutor, certainly can't be mad at the victim. I did this. So why not learn to control your anger a little bit and find another way to express it, instead of 30 years later being here, laying here in this rack in the middle of the night, tossing and turning, being mad at yourself and not knowing what to do with it.
This will probably sound like a really stupid question, but now that you bring this up, I mean, do you remember sleeping in a normal bed and remember just getting up in the morning and going to the refrigerator and getting what you wanted and all the things you take for granted?
People ask a lot of times, what do you miss the most about the streets? I remember laying in the bed one night with the window open. It was in the middle of summer. It had just rained, and we lived on a busy street. The sound of car tires on wet pavement. I know it's stupid, but the sound of car tires on wet pavement. Yeah, I definitely remember what it's like to sleep in a real bed. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to is being able to, at 2:30 in the morning, get up out of the bed, walk out the backyard and smoke a cigarette if I want, without having to check and make sure that I'm not violating a rule or something. Or go to the refrigerator and get something to drink. Yeah, absolutely. Or paying a bill, with something other than commissary. Just stupid little stuff that you remember and you really miss.
Because more than half your life has been spent in something.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing, and we'll give these kids hope that you still have hope. Because if you can serve 30 years and still have hope and come away with this with your mindset, then maybe that will show them
If you don't have hope, it's over with. If I didn't have some hope, that would be it. I don't know what would come after that, but to me, as long as there's life, there's a little bit of hope, and vice versa. I mean, there has to be. Is getting out of here at 67 years old something I want to do? Really? Can we even ask that question? I'd like to get out of here today, and I know exactly what I would do with my life, but you've got to hang on to that hope.
And that last part right there hit home for me because, man, I know the exact feeling of what he's saying about wanting to just hear, like tires on a wet street, because you got sensory deprivation in there. You don't hear no cars with the bass. You don't hear the sirens of the cars. You don't hear the helicopter. You don't even hear the cars go by. You don't even, none of that. You don't even, like I said in the other videos before, I didn't even see the moon for many years because I could never be in a part of the cell house, cell block, anywhere that I could see the moon beaming in, because you're already locked down, you're faced here, and it's crazy because all these little small things are things you take for granted. Getting up, going to the refrigerator, having food in there, choosing what you want to eat, making a meal, going outside when you want to, in prison, you locked in your cell majority on all mediums at like 9 o'clock. You ain't coming back out 9 o'clock. You locked down for the rest of the night. Day starts again at like 4:30 for laundry pull and kitchen workers and shit like that. But life, as you know, has been reduced to that behind that one bad decision. And you hear him, he said he'd get out tomorrow. He knows exactly what to do with life, but his plans are on pause until the state feels like it's time for him to get out and put them plans into action. And when he gets out, he's gonna be 60, 70 years old. Good God, like fuck. 67 in this year, imagine in this economy of where the world's at right now, trying to make it. I mean, anything's gonna be better than being in prison. So, you know, arms wide open. But really, how are you gonna survive on these type of bills that you got to pay out here 60, 70 years old after doing all that time? A piece of him is always going to feel comfortable in prison because he spent more than his normal life in prison. And I can relate to that because, you know, being incarcerated, getting out here, I spent 11 and a half of my life in a penitentiary compared to being out here as a responsible adult. So I relate. You know, there's a lot of struggles, and I think it's the beautiful thing about the internet, is being able to even tap into something like this, because just as that man's video said, maybe it can give hope to them kids that are in this situation, that he still got hope after 30 years. That's what I come to do, is do the same shit, give y'all some hope and, you know, some reality check that, you know, shit, after doing those bids, after having all that dirt thrown on you, then there's a brighter way. But you got to have the characteristics, the discipline, the consistency in your life to show up for you and to make the right decisions, because the right decisions is there to be made, but it's on you, and you have no one else to blame, like he said, when it all comes crumbling down, because there's no blame to put on somebody else. That accountability for him is super strong, that if you're gonna move your life forward, it's on you. And him saying that being incarcerated is crazy, because the majority of people in this free world can't even have that self-accountability for themselves and moving themselves forward, because I done did 11 and a half years and got back out to this world and seen people that I knew before still stuck in the rut. Here I am out 7.5 years, these people still stuck in a rut because, yeah, they probably blaming a lot of other people. They don't feel comfortable outside of their own little zone, and these are the things that keep us stuck in place. And when you're stuck in place, you're close to decaying, because that's what happens when you die, you stand still. But humans, we made to evolve and grow and expand and move forward. So I hope y'all found this video encouraging. I'm gonna do a couple more of them. Let me know what y'all think in the comments, and y'all hit that like button, tap that subscription button, and hit them notifications so you can be notified as soon as I drop a new video, because you see I got these things coming. Tapping with me. I'm out.